What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video, the RB0 strategy. In this video, I'll be going over what the strategy is, 2 example teams of using the strategy and not using the strategy, and ultimately if it's even viable for the 2019 fantasy football season. But first, we get to start things off with the stat of the day. Today's stat: among wide receivers with at least 10 targets last season, who had the most target separation per target? So that would be how much separation did they create from the assigned defender when targeted. Alright, let's move on to the RB0 strategy, and there are a few reasons why this strategy is a thing. And the first is how it relates to predictability. It is much easier to predict wide receiver success from a season-long standpoint than running backs. Wide receivers get injured far less, and they very rarely get replaced. Running backs, on the other hand, are the most injured position, and they easily, of the skill positions, are the most replaced. As in, even when not getting hurt, there are often times where a backup running back becomes the starter by the end of the season. The opposite is true from a weekly standpoint, and that's a big distinction. People think, oh, well, I need this stud running back because every single week we know they're going to produce a ton. We know that during the season. If you transport us into week 7, it is much easier in week 7 to predict running back volume and running back production than wide receivers. Wide receivers fluctuate a little bit more, but from a season-long standpoint, it's easier to project wide receivers. And in drafts, since we're trying to predict season-long production and our first 4 rounds are so important to get right, then it is logical to think you should target the easiest position to hit on. Also, everyone points to running backs early because there's so much wide receiver talent late, but realistically, you still have a very low chance of hitting on late wide receivers because we think we're getting all this value, but both running backs and wide receiver success rate stabilizes around 25% in rounds 8 on. So while we think we're getting a bunch of value, and we kind of are earlier in the offseason, once drafts come in August, these super values move up in drafts. They aren't super values anymore, and again, it stabilizes around 25% for both positions. The second positive for RB0 is just anti-fragility, and I sort of touched on this idea, but realistically, you should be drafting the most stable position with your highest draft capital picks, right? I mean, running backs get hurt and replaced more than any other position, so if you spend your high value picks on them, well, that can be seen as a risk. And since we're trying to avoid risk in the first 4 rounds, it's easy to conclude, hey, I should be targeting a position that's not going to be replaced, that's much less likely to be injured, that still has a ton of upside. The entire goal of an RB0 draft is to hit on one running back, just a single running back. All you need to do in the middle and late rounds is to hit on one guy, try and find one in free agency or trade for one. That's the whole goal of RB0, because if you can do that, let's say your 9th round running back goes off and you acquire one more through free agency or trade, your team is very likely to make a strong playoff run because of how you constructed the rest of your roster to just dominate. I started making this video 3 years ago, so we now have 3 drafts to look back on as a mini experiment on this strategy. It's nowhere near a conclusive study, but it gives a good idea of what drafts looked like and what the public reaction was to those drafts when it happened, and then what happened after the season was over. Because even these individual anecdotes are honestly individual data points, and now we have 3 of them to look back on. Before we do look at them, I have a request from you guys. There are a lot of people who are going to watch this video, and some of you might have access to more data than I do, whether this be through ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, not draft because it's a different format, there are different draft strategies, it's just completely different. I don't want draft data. But if anyone watching this video has draft data, probably at least 10 years of draft data, knowing what team took what player in what round, what position those players were, and then what place those teams finished in, then please email me so we can talk about the data. Because the only way to test the validity of these strategies over long stretches of time is to have access to this type of data, and I just don't have access to it. So I can talk about the logic behind them, why they're a thing, what I've seen happen, and what drafts look like when you implement these strategies, but I cannot say conclusively because I don't have access to data that could conclude results from these strategies. So if you have access to that data, let me know. But let's take a look at what we have seen happen. So in the 3 seasons, the overwhelming reaction in every single video has been that the value-based team was far superior. Remember I said at the beginning, I'm going to show you guys a draft that was RB0 and a draft that was, I say value-based, that's just like taking the best position and just kind of doing like a normal draft. However, in the first 2 seasons, 2016 and 2017, RB0 crushed. And then last season, it was very, very close. I do still give the edge to the RB0 team, but it was a lot more of a close draft. In 2016, I played them actually head-to-head each week, and RB0 won 11-5. In 2017, I stopped keeping track because it was embarrassing how much better the RB0 team was. And then last season, like I said, it was extremely close. But I had hit on Aaron Jones late on the RB0 team to match with Odell, Julio, Cooper, Diggs, Andrew Luck, and Lamar Miller, so the team was superior. And what I want you guys also to think about when I do mock draft Mondays, when I show this draft now, is free agency and trades. Because if you're using the RB0 strategy, you have a little bit of a different mindset late in the draft, through trades, and through free agency. You have to remember that roughly 50% of your final roster will not be players you drafted. And it frustrates me a little, when people look and have reactions towards mock drafts, because everyone looks at a mock draft and then tries to rate what the starting lineup would be in week 1. They're like, well, you're weak here because your wide receiver 2 is this. Almost no one takes into account depth when injuries happen, when you have to experience bye weeks, because basically every single week, starting in week 4, you're going to have someone on bye. No one takes into account how incredible the team could be if you do hit on some of these upside running backs late, because every single year there are running backs late that go off. Because when you draft a team, like I did in the video 2 years ago, that has stud wide receivers plus Kelsey, and you hit on both Hunt and Kamara late, you're gonna win your league. I mean, I in that league drafted busts in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th, and 10th rounds, and it still would have won almost any championship out there. Yet the general consensus when you show someone a mock draft is that you need to get those stud running backs, those studs that I know are studs now. Not the studs that we think will be studs. You need to draft people who are elite right now, and that's not the right mindset. You need to think about, how could my team look if these guys I think could become elite do? You need to envision how your roster will be if you actually hit on some of these late round picks, because you're trying to build a super team and you can't get a super team through the draft. You're gonna need to make trades and you're gonna need to make moves in free agency. Now, with all this being said, every single season is different. There's always a different number of running backs and wide receivers in the upper tiers, and that influences when you can use this strategy. I do not believe it's a viable strategy if you have a top 5 pick this season. Under any format, I do not care what the format is, you cannot do RB0 with a top 5 pick. You should be drafting the top running backs with those picks, because the wide receivers you'll end up with your second round will not make it worth reaching for Adams and Hopkins in the first and then getting those guys. You never reach to do RB0. It's something that happens when the value presents itself. So if you're drafting in the late first round and there's a huge run on running back, that's when you do RB0. You don't start a run at wide receiver early and forego running back value because you're just giving value to other people. It is the most viable with a 10 through 12 pick in a 12-team league this season. That's when that first tier of running back is always gone, but there are still a few first-tier wide receivers left on the board. I haven't done it yet because Damian Williams is almost always still on the board in that late first, early second range, and I prefer taking him instead of taking 2 wide receivers, no matter who the wide receivers are. But what I'm going to do is show you 2 example drafts from the 10 pick, assuming that the top 6 running backs plus Damian Williams were already drafted, because again, I wouldn't use this strategy if one of them fell. So here are the 2 drafts. The one on the left is RB0. The one on the right is a value-based team. Now, I don't think I need to explain the upside of this RB0 team if you play it right. If you find this year's gem free agent or if you can package together a deal for running back 1 on a team struggling at wide receiver depth, whether that be foregoing the position or maybe they suffered some injuries, you can easily see the upside of this roster. And since we're trying to get first place and not fourth place, you should be looking to build a team with as much upside as possible. There are 4 running backs on this RB0 team that have legitimate running back 1 upside, and the rest could finish as running back 2s. And that's another thing. We aren't looking to find a running back that's going to finish 30th in points per game, playing all 16 weeks and getting us exactly 9 points every week. You know, like there are a lot of people who will look at running backs like 35 through 50 and be like, ooh, that's a really good value because I'm pretty sure he's going to finish as running back 30, but he's going as running back 35. That's not who we want. We want high upside running backs that might end up as running back 60, but we can easily dump those players. We want the guys who could turn in to Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara picks that will win you your league. That's why I targeted Jones, Harris, Hill, Duke Johnson in the off chance he gets traded. If he doesn't get traded, it's not like an amazing pick, but I actually do kind of think he gets traded at some point. So that's why I took that pick. Because if one of that group breaks out, then I'm pairing that with my quarterback 8, my tight end 4, Michael Thomas, Odell, Diggs, Cook. That could legitimately win a league. And that's drafting out of position. Remember, this is without the ability to get a top 5 running back who are all set up to crush this season. Right? Like you look at another team and be like, yeah, but I mean, you don't have David Johnson. It's like, well, yeah, because I didn't have the chance. You know, this is strategy if you're at the back half of the draft and you're like, man, you know, I don't get Kamara, McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, Melvin Gordon, Damian Williams, David Johnson. Like, I don't get any of those guys. What am I going to do? This is something that you can do, because if you hit on running back late, you draft Chase Edmonds and David Johnson goes down, you're at a significant advantage to your league mates. Because honestly, look at this team. You're set at the wide receiver and flex position for the rest of the season. You have Michael Thomas, Odell, Diggs, Cook, Samuel. You're good. You do not need to even pay attention to wide receivers on free agency. All you're doing is staring at free agency, trying to find this year's gem. And you're looking at other teams. You're saying, who needs Curtis Samuel pretty badly? Who needs Brandon Cooks after he has 3 consecutive 100 touchdown games? Oh, I can get a running back 1 if I pair maybe the 2 of them together. That's how you build championship teams. You're trying to be smart during the season because you've built so much depth on your roster. And you're not taking zeros either. I'm not telling you to wait until like the 13th round to make Duke Johnson your running back 1. Like, that's not what we're saying. Because I genuinely believe Darrell Henderson will be start worthy out of the gates. I believe Miles Sanders is the best running back on the Eagles, who have the best offensive line in the league and who have one of the best offenses in the league. I believe Ronald Jones will open the season as the starter for a pretty high-powered offense. Then you're just upside hunting for the rest of your roster. So I would be perfectly comfortable going in with these running backs as my 1 and 2, and I'm pairing it with one of my favorite tight ends, elite wide receivers, and one of my favorite quarterbacks of the entire season. So yes, running back is extremely important, but look at the value-based team. You have more running back depth, that is correct. But what if the same thing happens as last season, where Dalvin Cook goes down? Because now you're sliding Henry up to your running back 1, which I know a lot of you aren't comfortable with. I honestly would still be comfortable with that. You're getting 300 touches in what should be a vastly improved offense. But let's say you're not comfortable with that. He's now your running back 1. Kenyon Drake's your 2. And then you've still got the same, if not less, bench than the RB0 team did. So 1 running back injury. That's something I want you guys to do after you're done a mock draft. What does your team look like with a single running back injury to like your 1 or 2, not to Justice Hill? Take out your first guy. What's your team look like now? You don't have as much depth as you thought you did. Do the same experiment with the RB0 team. Take out Miles Sanders. He suffers another hamstring injury and he's done. Pretty sure I can still slide in Ronald Jones or even honestly Duke Johnson to start the season because he's going to be the 3rd down back as I wait for an option on free agency. It wouldn't be as much of a blow as it is to the value-based team because you're not crushing at other positions. And this is another thing. You don't have to draft these players. Like, if you don't like the guys I put on this list, then draft the guys you like, because you can draft Kenny Golladay over Brandon Cooks or Julio over Michael Thomas. It's less about the exact player that I've included and more about the strategy as a whole. Just be absolutely sure that you aren't reaching for wide receivers or tight ends when using the strategy, because that would defeat the whole purpose and again give value to other teams in their picks. That's not what we want to do. And you might be asking yourself, well, how exactly do I know if I'm reaching? You might be doing mock drafts right now, but realistically the rankings on these sites are pretty terrible until about midway through August, and even then they can be pretty off. I genuinely believe that our draft package is the best in the industry. Not only is it the least expensive, costing you essentially nothing, but it provides you with all of the information you could possibly need to make the best decision on draft day. I use my own research along with information from other premium sites that I find valuable to compile concise, straightforward information to help you dominate your league. I have premium accounts on Pro Football Focus, Player Profiler, Fantasy Pros, the 1 Week Season, Establish the Run, Warren Sharp's Football Guide, RotoViz. All of these sites I have premium accounts for, so I use that information along with my own to give you guys digestible amounts of information to make the best possible decisions. Not to mention the fact that that package gives you access to our in-season content. So make sure to check out our draft package at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. And as a final summary for the RB0 strategy, if you end up with a 10 through 12 pick, you could expand that to 9 through 12, like maybe Devonta Adams or Hopkins is there at 9 and you just really like the strategy, you can do it at 9. I'd highly consider doing so as long as the wide receiver value is there and you don't reach on any of your first 5 picks. I'd really only consider going RB0 if you can snag 2 of DeAndre Hopkins, Devonta Adams, Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham Jr., Julio Jones, and Juju Smith-Schuster. If you can't grab 2 of those guys, then I don't think I would consider doing the strategy. I think with one of your first 2 picks, I would take a running back. And also, if your league is run by dinosaurs that still use standard scoring, I genuinely wouldn't even consider using this strategy. That scoring system is so unbelievably skewed towards running backs that you really just need to take them early in drafts. Even if there's a massive run, it is such an unfair scoring system towards the running back position that you just have to take them early in drafts. But if you do end up with a 10 through 12 pick in a full or half PPR league, and you can get 2 of the wide receivers I mentioned, then I'd strongly consider using this strategy because there are really good wide receivers available in the 3rd and 4th rounds. There are some high upside running backs in the mid to late rounds, and if you hit on one of these running backs to pair with an elite tight end and the insane value at quarterback, you're set up to crush in your league. All right, that's the end of this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, then make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and thanks for watching.